many hats, and we have the opportunity today to, as we think about vocation and call, to listen to some of the lessons Adriane has learned and passed on to us. So, thank you, Adriane.
Thanks, and I'm going to stand up here not because I want to hover, but just because I have to hit the button in a minute. So it's amazing to me that I was kind of surprised Jeremiah would even invite me to come, because when I think about calling, I guess I don't really feel like I've arrived anywhere yet. But I do have a journey that I can share with you thus far. And as Brian mentioned to you, I have a lot of things that are going on right now. I am a student right now at MTSO. I'm finishing up my degree in my MDiv degree. And I'm also working here at the university a little bit. I just I help Michael with mission outreach stuff. But I started as, that's me. That's my dad. So I am a preacher's kid, and I am a true seminary baby. My dad had me, my mom and dad both had me when he was out at ILIF in Colorado. And so I was born while he was going to school. I was 2 years old when he got his first appointment. And I lived my whole life growing up and moving from church to church with my dad, and eventually my two younger brothers came along. And for me, so when I think about general themes that have really made a difference in my journey, one of the things that has really affected me is the fact that I grew up in the church like that. And it's been good and it's been bad. So the good is that I grew up with this community where no matter where I was automatically loved. I was automatically looked after, and I had lots of grandma and grandpas and adopted family that would watch out for me. What was difficult and challenging in regards to my call was that there were a lot of expectations. So when you're a preacher's kid, there are expectations for how you were going to act, how you're going to be. There are expectations for what you'll do in the church. That of course you're going to be really involved in the youth group, and maybe even get it started and bring all of your friends. And so those expectations, I think, made it hard for me to really figure out where I felt like I was being called and who I wanted to be. I think I also struggled with the fact that, see, it's kind of ironic that the picture on the right is my dad dressing me like him. And I love my dad, he's a great minister, but when you grow up as a preacher's kid, you're always the minister's kid. So everywhere in town, everywhere I went, everybody knew my dad, and I was always David Rockhill's daughter. And so figuring out who I was in the midst of that was really challenging for me. And I'm the kind of person that, so if you gave me a signed reading, I am going to hate it automatically because I have to do it. So I might read War and Peace or Les Mis on my own time, and it's my favorite book. You tell me I have to read it for class, and I'm gonna hate it. And I felt kind of that way about my faith. Like, I just wanted it to be my own. I wanted to feel like it was my choice. And so I really struggled with finding my way for a while and figuring that out, and figuring out my faith for myself. And one of the things that made a really big difference for me, and Joe knows all about this, was camp. So when I got in high school, I was able to get involved with the United Methodist Church camps. So besides Joe, have any of you counseled? I look at Joe because we actually counseled together. He was in you were a CIT, I think.
We were on staff briefly together.
We were on staff briefly together, yes. But anybody else? All right, so I don't know how your experiences were, but for me it was really good because here was this place where I was not known as David Rockhill's daughter. Where I had my own identity, I could do my own thing. And I had this room, because you're in the middle of nowhere, to really think about my faith. and really figure out what I believed. And so for me, this was really important. And in the process, I discovered, oh my gosh, I have some things to offer. There are actually some gifts that I bring into the world, and I'm my own person, and I can do things. And I loved it. I loved being at camp. I loved having campers and trying to help them through the week and teaching them. So I discovered all of these gifts that I didn't even realize I had through that process, and also discovered my limitations. So, if you spend a week with campers, you realize really quickly, like, your limit of patience. You realize what it is that you are not able to do. And I learned a lot about that also by working in that environment. When I graduated, I came here, went to the University of Indianapolis, and I majored in social work because I wanted to make a difference. So I'd had enough experience in the church that I knew I wanted to do something really important to change the world, right? So I worked towards my social work degree, and while I was here, I had this chance to really be a leader and really grow into my own person. So again, here's this environment where nobody knows me, where I can be totally whoever I feel like I want to be. And I tried out all the organizations. I got involved in student government. I got very involved in the campus ministry, and I did a lot of the retreats. And the bottom left picture is from ASP. So that's when I was on team for the Appalachia Service Project. And if you know Paul Gabinet, okay, that's him in the bottom. In the center, he was our team leader. And he works doing something here now, right?
He actually just retired.
Did he just Yes, I'm that old. So through these opportunities, I had a chance, again, to really figure out what I had to offer and what my gifts were. And then I would try some things out, and I have to say that some of those opportunities were also like a big failure. I would get involved in something and think, I really hate this. This is awful. And I would just file that away and decide not to head in that direction. And something else I got involved with is summer companies, which is the bottom right picture. And that was a program, I don't think it exists anymore. But all of the campuses, you're laughing. I really am. I am so old, aren't I?
You're not old.
The summer companies was a United Methodist geared program. We worked with United Methodist churches. And campuses all over the Indiana state sent students, and then we put together teams, and we worked in these service or mission settings. So I worked in Indianapolis for 2 summers with inner city kids, just north of the Children's Museum, which there's a really beautiful area, and then there's the really not good area. And so these were kids who were daily involved with dealing with gangs and violence, and had family members who had been shot, and it was just a different kind of environment to be ministering in. And so through these experiences, I was just able to really further define what I wanted to be doing and what direction I wanted to be heading. One of the things, my junior year, that made one of the biggest differences in my call story is when I was able to go to Bosnia. So in 1998, I had the opportunity through this campus and some other campuses. They sent teams out to Bosnia, and then some of the teams went to Tbilisi, Georgia too. And we worked at a youth house, and I lived with a host family, and it was my first time ever leaving the country. And I had grown up, so my dad's a minister. All his churches are little tiny farm community. Right, I was pretty sheltered. I really had not seen very much or done very much. And so here was this opportunity to go to this country that just 2 years before we went there, in 1996, they had signed peace accords. So it was war-torn. There were still landmines. In fact, there are probably still landmines there today because it's so hard to remove those once they're put in. And so we went there, and we were just there to hang out with the kids and promote healing across ethnic barriers, which meant play with them. I brought my guitar. I don't play very well, that's why I don't have it here, and you won't ever hear me play it. But I brought my guitar, and I, for many days, just sat on the front steps with a bunch of other Bosnian boys, and they showed me how to play songs, and it was really interesting. But one of the things I took away from that was this understanding of the world that was much bigger than what I had known it to be before. And I saw this need that was different than the need I had experienced here. So I know that all of you are learning a little bit about how we're called based on where our talents and our passions intersect with the
Passions
world.
intersect with tools.
The tools
Point
with the
world's
world's needs, right? Yes. So if you want to know what the world's needs are, you have to get out and you have to actually learn about the world. And so that's a lot of what I've done since then, is I've just tried to look outside my walls and to learn about people. And Bosnia was a great introduction to that, because I learned about how hard it is for a country to recover from war, how devastating that is to families. My host brother was a little bit younger than me, but he just would casually talk about how, in fact, he pulled out his photo album, and oh, look, this was the time I was in the hospital because I got shot on the way to visiting my mom at the bank by snipers. Just as though this were the way life works. And it really got me thinking about the ways that I might be able to get involved and to help others here understand how we're connected and understand the needs that are present outside of the United States, all over the world. So when I came back, I decided to go into international relations. So I also had met my now husband, and we got married right out of our undergrad programs, and we moved to New Jersey, and I went to Seton Hall and got my master's in international relations. And while we were there, I did a study abroad program, and that's my top left, where I went to Luxembourg. And the dean of our program led the trip, and he was the former ambassador to Luxembourg from Greece. He was Greek. And so we practiced diplomacy. So we had to make presentations and wear suits and be very official. And we went and visited NATO and the EU and a whole bunch of really official places. And I discovered through all of that I'm a really bad diplomat. I make a much better lobbyist. I have trouble controlling myself from not saying what I think all the time. So I just realized that wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And so when we came back and I had graduated with my master's in international relations, I took some time off. I had my first baby. Sullivan is 11 now. And then went to look for jobs and realized that I didn't want to be doing any of them. I was applying to all of these places that I loved in theory, but I just really couldn't imagine myself going into the office and doing that work every single day. And that was very disconcerting for me. And at the same time, I kept thinking back to ministry and the ways that I really enjoyed being here in campus ministry and working in the camping program. And so then I came across this ad for a youth ministry position back here in Indiana. And it was part-time, and so I thought, well, I mean, that's ridiculous. You don't get a master's to go work as a youth minister part-time. But I couldn't stop thinking about this job, and I would, like for 2 weeks, I would go to sleep, and then I would wake up in the morning, and first thing in the morning, I would think about this job. And I would think, why am I thinking about this? I'm not going to Indiana, this is crazy. And finally, I thought, well, maybe God is trying to tell me something. I'm not going to take the job. I'll just apply for it. We'll see what happens. So I talked to Sean, we talked it over, and I went ahead and sent my application because, that's not committing to anything. And before I knew it, our whole family is packing up and moving to Indiana so I can take this youth ministry position and discern whether I'm being called into ministry of some other nature. My incredibly understanding husband moved out here and found a new job and has been very supportive of all of that. And from that point on, it's been kind of like wading into ministry. I keep getting a little further in every day. Youth ministry, I worked in that for 3 years, then thought, this isn't so bad. Maybe I should think about doing more of this. And so I got a mentor, I put my letter in with the district in the United Methodist Church. I know some of you aren't United Methodists, so in the Methodist Church, there's this very complicated process. So I wrote my district superintendent the letter, and I talked to my minister, who happens to be my dad. And they assigned me a mentor, Sue Carty, and we started meeting monthly and working through this process of figuring out if I was called. And I would come to the meetings very resistant. Like, I know this isn't really what I want to be doing, but we'll talk about it just for kicks, And after meeting with her, I slowly started to discover that I actually kind of enjoyed all of these things I thought I would hate. So, I thought, for example, that I would hate talking in front of people, because I did hate talking in front of people. I was so shy as a child. You would not even believe how shy I was. And I hated speech class. I did not like public speaking. And so the idea of preaching every week sounded horrible and awful. And, but, they needed someone to fill the pulpit, so I filled the pulpit and preached for 1 week. And I somehow muddled through it and wasn't so bad. Okay, well, maybe I'll try that again. And so slowly I found myself getting more and more into the ministry until finally my district superintendent asked me to take 2 churches and to look at getting licensed to be a pastor and then looking towards ordination. So I served at those 2 churches for 3 years. And then my DS moved me to Cambridge City, so I could go all in and get my degree at MTSO and finish this whole thing and hopefully get ordained. And there are a couple of lessons that I've learned. I'm so horrible with time. I don't know how I'm doing on time.
You're good.
Am I good? Okay. I talked way too fast earlier, so I'm just going to do it. One of the things that I've learned is that, especially with my call story, that life is not a straight line. So I thought, when I was little, that you have that magical occupation, that one day you will figure out what it is, and then you will do it, and you will be happy. But what I have discovered is that life is a lot more meandering than that. And for me, I've ended up going a lot of different places, and looking back, I can see the ways that they connect, the ways that those experiences have really helped me and have shaped me and formed me today. But at the time, they really didn't make so much sense. So for example, when I decided not to go into international relations, a lot of people thought I was pretty crazy. And in fact, I kind of wondered if I was crazy because I couldn't see how it would make any sense. I had just taken out $40,000 in school loans for this degree that I was then looking at not really using. My best friend was disappointed because I was her hope of having someone in the United Nations. And her hopes were dashed. I was going into ministry. And so it was really hard at the time to see how that experience would be helpful one day. And now that I have been through it, I can look back and see the ways it's benefited me. Because what I do in my congregation very much is geared towards missions and global outreach. And really that experience is part of what drives me in ministry because it makes me want to help the church be more outward looking. I want to help them gain that same kind of education and experience that I got in experiencing different cultures and getting outside their boundaries. And right now I'm doing my master's thesis, and it sort of ties in. So that makes it all right. So I can see ways that it all comes together, but life is not as clear-cut as I once thought it was. And for me, I like everything to fit into a nice, neat box. I would like, when I write a sermon, I have an introduction, I have a conclusion, and I want everything to tie together. And then you bring it all back around at the end and tie it up in a nice, neat package. And life is not like that. It's messy. And so there are all these things that at the time I really had no idea how it would fit in, and I still don't know how some of that is going to come back in. But what it has made me realize is that we never stop discerning. And in fact, the older I get, the more I feel like I have to do more discernment because I'm more aware of the needs of the world, and I'm more aware of the opportunities I have to do something about it. And so actually, I feel like I have to ask more questions the older I get and the more I get into things. The second thing that I think has been really important for me is that experience has been really important. So it's really good to get as much different experience as you can because that's what helps us discern what we're going to do. And for me, it was a whole bunch of process of elimination. So, I've done a lot of things, and I eliminated a whole bunch of things. When I was here doing social work, I had Tony Peabody, who was before all of your time also. I think she's retired. You don't know who she is, do you? You poor children.
Hey.
But,
The social workers would have heard of her name a lot.
no, have you heard of, yeah, she was incredible. But I had her for my practicum, and she used to tell us all the time that every experience is valuable, that you may not enjoy some of it as much as you do others, but every experience tells you something about what you want to be doing. So when you're doing an internship, you're learning, do I want to work in this kind of office? Is this the kind of work I want to be doing even? Do I enjoy this? And you may discover you really hate it, and that's still really good that you had that discovery. So for me, that's been a lot of my journey, is the process of elimination and trying new things. And then the other thing I have discovered is that I have to be ready for surprises all the time, because I never know what is going to be coming. And I could give you 100 different scriptures probably from the Bible that remind us that we have no idea what the future holds. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. And so for me, that's very hard because I like to plan everything. I like to know what's going to happen. Some might call that controlling. My husband only occasionally calls that controlling. But I like to know what's going on, and what I've discovered is that we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But what we can do is prepare for today. And for every one of us, we're all called today. And so, actually, really, it's more of a calling, not being called. And right now, this very second, I feel like I'm in the place that God is calling me to be. I'm doing work that I love to be doing, in a place with people that I really enjoy. I get to come over here and have fun with all of you and do things here. And so God is using me right now. I have no idea what's going to happen next year. I don't know if the ordination board is going to accept me in February. I don't know if I'm going to get to stay in Cambridge City or if they'll move me. But I know that right now I'm doing what God has called me to do. And that has been one of my biggest learning experiences, is learning to let go and be flexible and open to surprises. Because looking back, I mean, there's no way I could have expected some of the stuff that I've been through. I never would have guessed I would go to Bosnia in college. I never could have planned for that. And I never could have planned for being in the ministry. I never would have expected I would be here today. So really, I think we just have to be open to going where God calls us and responding wherever that need is. And for some of you, that might not be ministry. In fact, probably most of you, it might not be ministry. Or it might be ministry for a while and something else. Or it might be something else and then working in the church. There are a lot of different ways. But that's one of the biggest lessons I've had. So that's my present day. Those are all my kids at the bottom. And so now I have 3 kids, and my oldest is Sullivan, and Theo, and Evangeline is 4. And I feel like I'm able to live out elements of that call story every week and every day when I'm looking at serving and getting out in the community. So I guess that's pretty much it. So when you do this whole ordination process, you have to distill your call story into like 2 pages or less. It's so weird for me to come here and talk to all of you and you're actually listening to me a very substantial amount of time. But I would really love to hear from you if you have any questions or anything you want to share, any thoughts.
How long were you in Bosnia for?
We were there for 2 weeks, and I really wish we could have been there longer. And in fact, if I could go back there, I would. It was really incredible. Have any of you ever done an international trip of some sort? So, I mean, it's really, good or bad, it's really eye-opening, I think, just to see how different communities work and how different things are.
Adriane, you mentioned getting involved in lots of places. When there's lots of good choices, how do you discern where to put your time?
That's a very good question. I actually get asked that question all the time because I have a lot of stuff that I do. And my life is very much, a whole lot of my life consists of setting priorities and prayerfully discerning where I need to spend my time. So since I grew up as a PK, I have in the back of my mind this idea that I really want to make sure that I'm there for my kids. Not that my dad wasn't there for me, but I know that ministry can be really consuming. So So I have to make them a priority, and I have a lot of other priorities. So I start by asking the question, how do I feel about this? Do I feel energized and passionate about this? Because a lot of things that I do, if I'm excited about it, it doesn't seem like work, and somehow the time is found. So I can squeeze a lot more in when I'm excited to do it. And that's made a difference with my seminary, getting my seminary done, because I love school. And I love studying the things I love to study in school. So I love seminary. I loved my international relations degree. It was great. Really challenging, but since I enjoy it, it makes it not so hard to have to drive out there every week. I also have to spend a lot of time talking with others, and in my case, my husband has to be part of those decisions. So whenever we have something coming up, like for example, I'm thinking about going with the ASP. Lang has talked to me, and I don't know if that'll work out or not, but the first thing I said to Lang was, I need to go talk to my husband, because everything that we do is a negotiation, and he's a teacher down at Connorsville. He's a department head, and he has his own important work in ministry that he does there. He doesn't get to call it a ministry, but it's very much a ministry what he does. So we do a lot of coordinating of responsibilities, and especially with the kids, we do a lot of negotiating beyond who gets to do the dishes and all of that. And so really, I think those are the key components. And my faith really is important to me in that when I was looking at international relations, the one piece that was missing that made me not so excited about working those jobs was that I felt like I wasn't being able to live out my faith in those jobs in the way I felt called to live that out. And so I think my faith and discerning where God is calling me kind of runs through all of that. I probably like that's a really long answer, and I don't know if I even answered your question, but yes, it's complicated.
What other questions do you have?
What does a typical weekday look like in a pastor? Facing your face.
Okay, so with my pastor hat on, what's a typical pastor day? So when I do my church work days, one of the things I love about ministry is it's really hard to find a typical day. So you really don't know what you're going to find. And for me, that's great because I love new challenges. So for example, 3 weeks ago, a typical day for me was I was getting ready to have family night, and I got a call that one of the members of my church had been put in the hospital. And I ended up spending 2 days over at the hospital with him. And I hadn't expected that, but that's part of ministry is you don't know and you just respond to whatever might happen for the week. And then the more mundane would be, I might start by thinking about my scripture and my sermon for the week, and I like to mull that over all week. So I would start the week by looking at that and thinking through things that might relate to that, and answering emails. I got a call here today about music. Somebody at the church is looking for music. Where is it? Where can we track down this accompaniment? So a lot of those kinds of things. And one of the pieces of advice that my mentor gave me that I think was very good is she said that when you're in ministry, you can spend a lot of time putting out fires, and you don't want to get into the habit of that being the only thing you're doing. So we're not firefighters, you don't want to just be on reaction mode. So I try to do a lot of visioning and planning with my congregation too. But there's a lot of stuff that comes up, so it's a very good question.
Are there any like spiritual practices that have been really meaningful throughout your call story?
Yeah, well, I am a introvert by nature. I'm becoming more extroverted as time goes on because of the nature of what I do. But time alone is very important for me. So I really try to work in some solitude. And I used to struggle more with that than I do now. Now I have a 2-hour drive to Columbus, Ohio every week. 4 hours, 2 hours there, 2 hours back. And so I have 4 hours of solitude every week to sit in my car and meditate or listen to a devotion or something. So so that is very important to me. And then I really like to be creative. And so I have trouble sticking to spiritual practices that end up getting boring after a while. I know, so I've heard you're supposed to push through it. Eventually it's still beneficial. No, you don't feel like reading your scripture today. Well, okay, eventually you're gonna really be glad you did. And I do try to do some of that. But I try to mix it up. So like lately I've been getting into photography and I'll take pictures. I'm doing something with my church where I'm asking them to submit how they see God in the world. And I think that's a spiritual practice because it's training us to look at the world and see where God is. And, so I try to incorporate spiritual practices into what I'm doing. And then that way I can do more of them. But probably the biggest one would be the solitude and the silence. I find the most beneficial.
The Windows Facebook page, public or private?
It's public, so yeah, actually if any of you wanted to get on there, you could look me up if you wanted to. But it's been a really neat way to, a lot of people, some people who don't even come to my church will post some things on there. And
It's called Windows for?
Windows on God.
On God, Windows on God.
It was kind of there was a secondary reason I did that, which is that I have a PowerPoint that I use at my church, and I wanted to get copyright-free pictures to use. So there's the disclaimer that anything you're submitted on there could be used for worship. But so it helps me out also. But anybody is welcome to get on there and use those pictures for worship though. So. Any other questions? Yeah.
Okay, so if you're interested in international relations, you probably wanted to go everywhere. Where did you discern where you traveled? Like, how did you discern where you traveled?
It had most to do with just where the opportunities were that I was offered, because I have very limited funds and resources. So with Bosnia, it was the fact that they were taking a Bosnian trip, and John Young offered to find funding for me so I could go. And when we were in for my master's degree, when I went to Luxembourg, I took out student loans, which at the time seemed like free money. I'm paying those back now. It was because the school was offering the trip, and I had money to pay for it, and it counted as a class. So a lot of it's had to do with that practicality. But if I were to give advice for somebody who's trying to discern and narrow down options, immersion is a really great way to get language training. And one of the things I think that we are most lacking in the United States is having that second understanding of another language. And so now when I look, I always lean towards the country I'm trying to get fluent in Spanish. So I would lean towards opportunities that would give me a chance to get more fluent in the language that I'm working on. there might be other really good reasons you would pick a place too. But that's something to consider is looking at language training. So.
Any other questions? Well, we just want to say a huge thank you to Adriane for being here with us and sharing her story. I know it's interesting to hear Adriane's story. I think every time we share stories, we hear things, right? Things that connect with our story or things we learn from or the questions that come up. It's a way that I think God works in and between our stories to guide us and direct us. And I didn't actually. Maybe I'll ask you one question in closing, which is, one of those places that our stories keeps interacting is communities. So I'm curious, and for our class in particular, as we've looked at how we practice our faith within community, where have those communities been most powerful in helping shape and form who you are today?
I have, especially recently, in fact, I'm incorporating it into my thesis because I think the idea of community is so important, and it's really been lost in a lot of ways from the way that our society here in the United States practices and our culture. And community, I think, has made a huge difference to me. I mentioned that there were a lot of practical reasons why I went into what I did, and a lot of that was people encouraging me or helping me find a way or noticing things and kind of pointing me in that direction. And I have done a lot of wading in, taking baby steps, and what makes the difference is when the community is there to come in, and then I know that I'm heading in the right direction. When I was in Cuba earlier this year for a cultural immersion, and none of you have been to Cuba, have you? Actually, UIndy went to Cuba last year, and they went to the same place that I went to. Awesome. And they had the same bus driver I had. But they have, one of the things they have there is this really incredible sense of community, where you feel like you belong, and everybody really understands the value of that. And I used to say, I would joke with our translator that I was an independent woman, that I didn't need their help because, I've got it under control. And I was kind of joking, but he understood that and then said, that's actually really offensive to us. and he said, because he said, here, it's not positive to be independent. He said, that is seen as being kind of arrogant. He said, really, here, we want to rely on each other. Those are really good things, to be dependent on one another. And I feel like I am still indebted to that community. As I look towards ordination, I know I would not be doing this if it weren't for the community. And my church that I'm serving right now has been incredible. And they have really supported my education, my being gone every week, and a lot of things like that have made this possible. So I think if you are focusing on community, it's good. It's a good thing, and it's really good to think about who are those people that matter to you, and to cultivate those relationships. And doing that here is also a good way to practice that. So
let's start our thanks, Adriane. And we'll close with prayer and just